Good evening, and thank you so much again for tuning in to Magnifying Your Impact. And I'm really chuffed to be talking to a great friend of mine this evening, in Simon Andrews. And I met Simon while skiing, actually. We were lucky enough to go on a skiing holiday together. And I met him through another wonderful entrepreneur in Chris Morling, who you'll see also in this channel. And Simon has been instrumental over many years to help millions of youngsters to really find their path, both through education and through their careers. And Simon's built, again, over a number of years, the Big Choice Group, which allows young people to get real clarity, which I want to talk to Simon, obviously, about today, as well as his philanthropic endeavors, to really look at how he can magnify impact for so many people culturally around the world. But to say that Simon is humble and, you know, does an enormous amount in the world is an understatement, because he really seems to me, and you know, whether I'm embarrassing him or not, really seems to me that he does things quietly and, you know, sits back and really, you know, thinks about things properly and goes very deep and understands how change really happens. So it's great to talk to you tonight, Simon, and thank you so much for joining us. And with that introduction, can I just ask you to give us a couple of minutes, if you can summarize your entire life so far in 2 minutes, that would be great. Just give us an intro. 2 minutes or 4 minutes, whatever you want.
I'm going to go for it, 2 minutes. Yeah, I guess it really started when I left university in '99. I moved to London from where I grew up, which is in a town in Dorset on the coast. So I moved to the city in London, trying to look for a job, and actually got quite disillusioned with the whole trying to find a job for young people. So instead of trying to find a job, I actually set up a company called thebigchoice.com, which really looked at solving some of the challenges that young people face when leaving university. So that was my starting of my first or second company. Was the Big Choice, and that was really helping young people look at the type of career they wanted to do. And this wasn't just focused at students leaving university, but it was also looking at students leaving school, which was another area that was at the time being overlooked. And I appreciate these days it's in the UK, it's being more addressed with apprenticeship schemes. But then I was looking at the whole helping young people leave school, leave university, and giving them access to thousands of employers using technology and connecting young people with companies. So that was really thebigchoice.com was my first ever company that I grew quite successfully, which then we started to attach other additional complementary type businesses, helping young people then connect with universities, young people in the interests of media. So we started building 3 or 4 different products within Big Choice Group. Ones were connecting with careers, work experience, and then we grew it to the International Student Admission Service, which was an international business, which was helping young people all over the world, connecting them with universities. So that was the final piece of our company, and that was over expansion of since 1999, since then I left university, to a couple of years back, to setting up the International Student Admission Service. And we employed about 200 people around the world, predominantly in Latin America, in North America, and in UK. And we were helping hundreds of thousands of students both find a job and find a university. That's as much as I can get in 2 minutes.
So very good, thank you. So Simon, while I come up with a number of different questions as you talk, and one that really interests me, which I'm fascinated by, the mixture between our genetics and our environment, really, and what shapes us as a human being. And so when you were young, whether it's you want to answer this question when you're 8 years old, 12 years old, or for that matter, when you finished school, which would probably be more of a prevalent question for you, is when you finished your schooling and you then started your companies, what did you see? What did you vision for your future when you were just starting off in the world? What were your dreams? What were your ambitions?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess at an early age, I remember my dad once said to me, he said, "Son, what do you want to become?" I thought I must have been at the age of sort of 6, 7, 8. And I always remember the answer I gave. and I wanted to become Evel Knievel. The most important career that I could think of at the time. And then that progressed from Evel Knievel to being a stuntman, which I thought that offered, good career progression. But as time gone on and I got a bit more sensible, I looked at wanting to become a programmer, an accountant, or a lawyer. So they were the sort of things going around my head at an early age of 7, 8, 9, all the way up to sort of 16, and kind of as a young person, what do I want to get involved in? The things that I was really passionate about and things I really loved were the things that I was fortunate to live on the coast in a place called Poole in Dorset, and access to forest and the coastline. And I always had a harmony with the planet, and whatever I was going to do, I knew I wanted to be involved in something that had a positive impact on what we did. And I think hence why all my involvements in businesses, at the heart of it hasn't been, can I make a lot of money out of this? It's the why, it's the purpose of what this business is doing, and how can it help in some way in the community, or have a positive impact on people's lives. So I think as a young person, that's always been something I've wanted to do.
And so when, I've got an 18-year-old now, and you've spent your life helping so many thousands of youngsters to find a path, because I think when I was 17, 18, 30 years ago, there may have been, I don't know, 50 careers we could have chosen, or, and looking at your own skills, you may have been able to scale that down to 20 different options. And now there's 2,000 options or 20,000 options for these kids. But when you look at your entire career and you look at all the skills and all the choices that you made when you were 18, when you had all these choices, what do you think are the 3 most important decisions that you made early on that have helped you to make this level of impact in the world, that have made you successful? What do you think? So if you were going to give some advice to a youngster, to an 18-year-old or a 21-year-old, looking at your decisions, how would you advise a youngster right now? What do you think their path is to make those successful decisions?
Yeah, it's a good question for a young person. I guess it's that balance between looking at the things that you enjoy. And I think when choosing a career, however young you're starting to look at that, and that's always difficult for a 16-year-old whose future perhaps isn't thinking about necessarily their career or the impact on their career and what that might have later on in their life, like the house they might buy, or the type of partner they might meet, or the type of car they might drive. And these are the things that you don't necessarily think about. I think it's about, as a young person, think about things that you enjoy, things that you feel passionate about. And I think doing something in your career that you care about has a much more meaningful impact, and you'll much more enjoy that type of career if you first take a little bit of step back when you're younger and really analyze, what is it you like? If it's sports, maybe it's you can't go on and be a premiership football player or the best netball player, but perhaps it's something about sports therapy you can do. I think take a step back and think about what you enjoy, and focus on perhaps the careers around that, and then look at exploring more about that type of career, the type of skills you want, and the type of education that will help you get that type of career. So find something you're passionate about and that you enjoy, and that the next 30, 40 years that you're going to spend working, go and enjoy something you enjoy doing.
You now have built a number of different teams. So, we're the guys and girls who are tuning into this, and, we've got people who are really looking at running non-for-profits and social enterprises and community interest companies and philanthropists and entrepreneurs. What is your advice as far as creating a really empowering culture? Because, I suppose some of us who are leaders in this kind of non-for-profit world, we either grow a team from scratch, which you've done, and there's people I'm sure listening to this that are coming into a team and having achieved a position as CEO or an operations director or finance director, and the culture is not what we want. it's not conducive to making that positive impact. So what's your advice with all the teams that you've been around and all the people that you've helped worldwide? What's your advice? If you could give us 3 things that create a winning culture, what would it be?
Gosh, I mean, I think I've always been lucky at the beginning to be able to set something up from scratch. So I think that's been helpful. And I think for some established organizations, some of these will take some time to embed. But I think giving everybody in your organization a clear vision, where is it you're going? I think everybody within an organization, how small, how big it is, wants to clearly understand what are your aims and objectives over the next 2-3 years. What is it that I come in every day and want to work? So a really clear vision. And I think the next thing is probably a purpose. Is like, if everybody gets out of bed every day, a purpose. And what is the positive impact today that I'm having on my organization that I put my 8 hours a day in? And what is that 8 hours, that positive impact on achieving that vision that company, organization has set out? And I think probably the final point, the third point to that, is probably your values. What is it your organization stands for in terms of a value? In terms of if you ask people what are the values of your organization, if you got people together, would they say the same thing, or would they say different things about your organization? And so I think for me, it's a really clear vision, having a real purpose, and having organizational values. And I think the final point to all that is, it's not a textbook example. It's not something you do in a university lecture. It's really important to have the buy-in from all the team, the whole organization, and understanding really what the purpose is, what the vision is, and really what your organizational values are. And that's not you giving it to them. They've got to be part of that process. So get them involved. That's what I say. Get people involved in where you're heading, empower your workforce to be part of getting you to your vision.
And how much time do you spend at the beginning when you start something up, Simon, or when you look at the Big Choice Group and study and the different platforms that you've used, both face-to-face and technologically, to make a difference in the world? How much time when you start an organization should you spend before you even hire somebody? How much time should you spend looking at your vision, your purpose, and your values? I mean, is it as you go along to just sit there every day and say, what are we doing today? Or is it giving people a roadmap as you interview them at the start of everything to really lay out the foundations of your vision first? How much time do you spend doing
that? For me, it's everything. I think you start with, it's the DNA of your business, it's your culture. And therefore, I don't think people do it as an end exercise, but I think at the beginning is really you hone in on your vision, your values, your purpose, your clear objectives of where you want to be. So I think you should spend lots of time, but it's not something you just pin up on a wall somewhere that when people...
No.
It's better your induction, when you recruit people, when you advertise, when you induct them, your constant reviewing of where we are and relaying that to what your clear objectives and where you are on your vision. So I think it's not something that you just sort of put up in a presentation once a year. It's something you do when you recruit people, when you induct people, when you do training, when you do mentoring. I think all of that has to work together. And then you get a real harmony, a real synergy between everybody in the organization.
Me and you have had a couple of amazing, in the last few months, we have a couple of amazing conversations to go really deep with regards to the challenges in the world and what our beliefs are, spiritual beliefs, and how we look at the world. But when you look at the moment, we're sitting here in the middle of the pandemic of the coronavirus, and there's so much loss, pain, suffering around the world, more than we can ever imagine. And yet there's, of course, this sense of hope, and that nature's getting a break, and there may be lots of silver linings, and there'll definitely be great opportunity at some point in the next number of years that come out of these learnings. But when you look at the coronavirus, or you look at different challenges around the world, what do you spend your time thinking about? What do you think, Simon, are the biggest challenges in the world? And how do you feel that we as a global entity can overcome these challenges?
Gosh, another really good question. I guess at the heart of it, I think there's something removed from people when we think about ourselves. And often, and having done quite a bit of traveling, I think the biggest thing is actually a lot of people say, what difference can I make? I hear it a lot. Well, you know, what difference can I make? But actually, each person can make a big difference in everyday life. So I think that's really where at the start is every person can have a positive impact. And I think things like, you know, climate change, I think it's bandied around a lot. I think it's more about how people use the planet, how we consume things. And I think the big thing for me is about sustainable living. I think that's it. You have 70, 80 years of your life. Do I leave this planet in a better condition than I found it?
Yes.
We all have to, as people, recognize that we're probably not. And if you analyze why that is because the way that we consume this planet. Am I subscribed to the fact that I think the planet is suddenly going to, man is going to kill this planet? I don't necessarily subscribe to that. This planet has been around a few years.
Yes.
I'm not sure that we're going to kill this planet off. However, we can leave it in a better condition than once we find it in to our children and their children. And I think there's simple things that you can do around sustainable living. I mean, simple things like water. Don't leave your, make sure your dripping taps are off. Electricity, put a simple jumper on. Try not to, when you go to a supermarket, don't buy products that, are wrapped up in loads of packaging. Trust me, broccoli doesn't need packaging.
Yeah.
It doesn't. And bananas don't. They come in wildlife, nature has its own way of packaging things that are
yes,
good for human consumption. Try growing your own vegetables. And I think we're in a society today that if something breaks, we just throw it.
Yes.
We're a throwaway nation. And I know, try fixing something. I think.
Yes.
And then just, I guess, recycling, recycle things as much as you can.
So, Simon, when you think about yourself as a person and everything that you've done and, in business, but also I want to talk about your mountaineering for a moment, because you've climbed some amazing summits and you've been out in the wilderness and you've traveled an enormous amount, but also you've put yourself in some very tricky environments, tricky situations. And there's probably been a lot of times, in fact, I know talking to you, there's been a lot of times where you could have said, I've had enough. I'm giving up, or I'm going down, I can't be bothered anymore. And that's not in your nature. Your nature is to keep going and to take people with you. So just give us some advice about when you get to a place where you've had enough, and you're cold or you're wet or you're tired, or the business is becoming too much, or it seems like too much of a massive challenge, and or you're looking at a summit that's 18 hours away and your water's frozen and you haven't got much food left and you're in bits. What psychologically this is very important to people out there, I think, right now, is when you get to the end of your tether, what do you say to yourself to take that next step? What do you say to yourself to say, I can do this? So I've got two questions here. One is, where has this drive come from? Is it genetic? Is it from your environment or your parents? Is it from you? Is it a question you ask yourself? That's the first thing, is what stimulates you to never give up and just take that next step? And the second piece is, what do we need to do before we enter into something to prepare ourselves properly emotionally? Because, one thing is, once we're in trouble, how do we have the mindset to keep going? But the second thing is, how do we prepare our life so we're prepared for difficulty?
Yeah, I'd say the first point you raise about why I do it is an interesting one about this, because I have put myself in some very difficult places at times, and I then question myself when I'm there, why am I here? you know, when people say, how did your holiday go? People presume I'm on a beach sipping a cocktail somewhere on the Seychelles. And when you know, 6,000 7,000 meters in a snow hole with 100-kilometer winds blowing through, it's a very different perspective. I do it because I think one of my biggest things is get outside your comfort zone. Is one of them. So I think when you get comfortable, all things become normal. I think every time you put yourself outside your comfort zone, it's uncomfortable because it is outside your comfort zone. And that's when some amazing things happen, amazing experiences, the things that you wouldn't necessarily do. So I think for me, it's always, am I too comfortable, and taking myself outside my comfort zone. And then that part of that outside the comfort zone becomes your comfort zone. And so you continue trying to push yourself outside that. So I think that's probably one area that why I do it. I think the other is that I think when you go to really remote places, whether it's across the Sahara Desert or in some mountainous regions or across the Amazon in the jungle, I think it's the amazing people and the honest communities you meet. And I think that allows me to put perspective on life, because these people are living in humble means. Whether it's in the Khumbu Valley in Nepal, where people are picking up yak dung and making balls and putting a bit of oil, and that's their heating. So I think it's just through my experiences in traveling, just the humble communities that you meet that allow you to really put a perspective on life and realize that all the materialistic things in life that really aren't that important. So that really helps, and I've really enjoyed the learning of that, because it's really helped me approach other things in life, setting up a company, trying to understand people. I think I've got a lot from that.
And you know, through all these difficult challenges and this discomfort that you've gone through, to then make that the comfort zone and to travel and get perspective on the difficulties in life that people face, and also the opportunities that you have, you've created through your companies and visiting all these people and going to these different environments, you've created lots of internal resources that help you to keep going. How have you taken who you are and leveraged it? So what's your advice when somebody's looking to start off or somebody's looking to build a company? How do you leverage your resources to make most of an impact? What's your advice with regards to taking who we are and making that much bigger impact?
Yeah, I think my advice is obviously look at what you're passionate about. I think being able to build something that takes your own resources. And I think if I give you an example, having sold Big Choice Group a couple of years back and had the fortunate opportunity to work with Chris, co-founder at Study, really look at what do we want to do. So we took a step back, looked at knowing that we wanted to build a platform that helped young people all over the world try and find an education in any country in the world, and really not looked at how can we make profit, but really looked at how we can build a business that, if it's successful, can give back into the community that we work. So I think for us, we started at that point. It's if it's successful, then how can it give back? And I think that was really important. A few initiatives, which again, you know, when you've got great teams around you, it's not my ideas. We had our VP of Global Comms, which is Laura Etty, who put this idea that we wanted to create something really special in terms of the impact that students who travel have an impact on this planet because they use flights. So how can we do something there? So we came up with this initiative, which, Craig, I know you've been part of and you've helped us along in China on that journey. So we came up with the Trees for Degrees, the 1 Million Tree Project, which is an initiative that Laura came up with at Study. So that compensates the travel that international students that we enroll at a university where they leave their country, they do 2 flights a year, and we compensate that by planting trees to compensate for that traveling. So that's just one example. The other was that we take 3% of our turnover, and we've, as again, Craig, you know that we set up the scholarship fund to help young people where, again, we work with very privileged people who can go and afford an education overseas, but what about those people who don't? So we want to be part of a business that gave back to those who aren't have an advantage. So we created a scholarship fund that gave 3% of our turnover, not profit, to 3% of our turnover back into communities and creating a scholarship fund. And the other part that we created, as just an example, is how can we help our team? So we've got this great thing of a company, we're planting 1 million trees. We've got this project to create a $1.8 million scholarship fund. But how do we help our team members? So our final part of that was actually to give everybody 3 days a year in addition to their holiday, to go and do something, volunteering work, to give back into their community. So I think it probably starts with trying to look at what you're trying to do with your company. And if your company's successful, then it gives back into the community seamlessly. And we haven't decided, let's set up a foundation where we need to employ people. Therefore, some of that money has to go to employing people. We really wanted to give it to the charities that knew what best to do with it. And, and thanks to some of the work that you've done and supported us, we've been able to approach the right charities to allow us to continue to be successful in our business. But that is to help young people who don't have access to always a great education, have access to it, to compensate some of that travel. So I think that's been, a great thing. And I've played a small part in that. But as I've said, there's been lots of people involved in that. And I think that's been exciting.
And who do you think, with everything that you have done and are doing in the world, who do you think has most inspired you? Because I'm a huge believer in something that I learned about 15 years ago now, which is, who we spend our time with is who we become. And I've been inspired by a number of people around the world in my career. Who are the 2 or 3 people, or indeed the one person that's inspired you most, that's helped you along your career?
That's a very good question. Probably if I break it down into 2, if that's okay.
Yes.
From a business perspective, probably Yvonne Chouinard, probably, if some name pops in my head, who's the founder of Patagonia. And Yvonne was a big climber in the 60s, 70s in Yosemite on the El Capitan. And I've heard a lot about Yvonne, and I love he's an environmentalist. He's bought some national parks out in Patagonia and built the Patagonia brand. What I like about the Patagonia brand is the philosophy behind it. And I think the whole is like, well, you buy one of their products, which is all outdoor clothing type products that you might be aware of. Their whole ethos is, if you've got a zip broken or you've got a tear, then send it back to them and they'll fix it. It's not, well, let's just throw it away and I'll go and buy another Patagonian jacket.
No.
It's sent us back to it. So I think Yvonne Chouinard and the whole ethos of Patagonian brand I've really liked. I think the other one on a personal level, and not to be too cliche, is my parents. I think they've been a huge impact in my life and who I am, and shaped me up. And I've lived with my parents who've been married for 46 years. And I think what a great way of bringing up in a family of that, where they not once have they had an argument, or I've seen them ever argue. I count my huge blessings that I've been brought up in a family with that type of stability in it.
Yes.
A huge impact on me. So probably those 2. Yvonne Chouinard from Patagonia, my amazing parents.
And, apparently there's over 8,000 hours in our year. And how do you divide up when you look at all the things you're passionate about, and being by the ocean and climbing mountains and, really helping youngsters? And there's so many different passions that, that you live at the fullest within your life. How do you get that work-life balance when you're trying to sort out companies that really make this impact of a couple of 100 team members, and then you've got all your students all over the world, and then you've got your mountaineering and this and that? How do you take time, and how do you split your day or your year up so you get that work-life balance?
Probably very badly.
Okay. Like most of us.
Yeah, probably very badly. But I am a big philosopher. Look, there's 24 hours in a day, 8 of them you sleep, 8 of them you're with loved ones, and 8 of them you spend in work. So that's kind of how I try to divide it all up. But I probably haven't been the best at, and you probably have asked any of my family members, how great am I at balancing my work-life balance? And I'm probably not the best. And that's because at times, you've got to push yourself and to be good at things sometimes. There are sacrifices. And in somewhere, you're not going to get more than 24 hours. So somewhere, something has to give. And if your work has to expand, it's either going to be you're going to sleep less or you're going to spend less time with your family. And therefore, you need to have real awareness of that. But when I do get, Greg, to have some work-life balance, as you know, I tend to then get outdoors. My passion is to get above clouds, which is been amazingly to travel in some really lovely places in Africa and Asia, South America, North America, and go and climb some really cool mountains, meet some really nice people, and take those experiences away from me. And it's made me make, I think, better decisions in my life.
I've asked you about the people that have inspired you, but what do you think of the moments or experiences that have guided you the most? Are there 2 or 3 salient points in your life that have really shaped your decision making? Is it leaving school or leaving university or starting the Big Choice Group or leaving the Big Choice? Is that what are the 1 or 2 moments that have really shaped who you are, do you feel?
I think probably my first business. I left school in college, and I set up my first business, which was installing fish tanks into hotels and into private residential places, and they would pay a monthly fee and I'd set them up. Long story short, sadly the business failed, but I think that was a big learning curve for me. That was my first time of setting something up. I was quite proud of it. I set up a business. I set up a business bank account at the age of 16. Lloyd's Bank was where I had my business bank account. I had a small overdraft to help fund some of these things. But it all failed. But I realized, actually, I looked back at that time and realized it wasn't failure. I just learned, it was just an opportunity to learn so much.
Yes.
That to me, I thought I'd failed, but actually, I was looking back at that stage, and I actually remember thinking to myself, well, actually, like life, I thought the world had ended, but actually I started thinking, well, I learned loads, and there was some really good things that came from it. So instead of looking at the negative parts of what went wrong, I also looked at the positive parts and took both away from me, and that helped me going forwards in terms of my next business adventures. And luckily, Craig, they turned out a little bit more successful.
Yeah. So when you look at the non-for-profit, world, and those of us who are looking to grow and develop positive impact through charities, through social enterprises, through community interest companies, through philanthropic endeavor, when we're looking to make a powerful positive impact to the world through non-for-profit, in your experience, what's a piece of advice that you can give us when we're growing these charities or growing these enterprises? What do you think is the most important piece of advice that you can give us, not just when we're at the beginning of it, but when we're going halfway through it and we come across something like the coronavirus? Because some people, I know, there's a number of people listening to this that 3, 6, 9 months ago, everything was flying. And now suddenly the external world hits you hard and you're not flying anymore. So what's your biggest piece of advice for us in this situation? What do we need to think about?
Yeah. I always come back to, and it doesn't really matter whether you're a startup or a large organization or charity. For me, having a clear vision, a set of values and a purpose. And the reason that I say that is that obviously today we're impacted by a global pandemic.
Yes.
Nobody would have thought. And even for us at Study, it impacts us because of international travel and placing students.
Yes.
What's helped us is that we have a clear vision of where we want to be. Our vision is over 3 years. So we don't look at necessarily the now. Our vision drives the whole business going forwards. So I think that helps, and having a sense of purpose of that, and knowing, okay, this is where we want to be, but things don't always go to plan, but we do have a plan of where we want to be. Things sometimes change, but knowing that it has a self-confidence with your team, the way that we work together, the way we approach some of these problems, because our plan goes beyond 2020, 2021 and 2022. So there is some comfort knowing that there is a plan going forwards. And while things do change, we will get there somehow.
Yeah, and you've got a deep reason for doing it, haven't you? So that's the point from a purpose perspective. No matter how hard things get, you've got a real reason to keep going. Yeah,
it's like, I mean, I hate the analogy, but it is like climbing a mountain. If you don't know where your summit is, then where are you really going? If you can't plan for that because you don't know where you're going and where your summit is, then how can you wear the right equipment?
Yes.
So I think that's really. I think the other things is there's no boundaries. The only boundaries that we put on each other are the boundaries that we create.
Yes.
In comfort zone. So just remind ourselves that we create our own boundaries, and I think. Probably the other one is, as long as people got a purpose and a clear vision and they know where they want to go, empower your team to get there. That give them direction, but let them decide. Empower your team. You employ talent, get them to come up with, okay, how are we going to get there, and let them come up with the solutions. But give them some guidance on where you want to be. Then empower them to come up with the answers, and I think that's really important. And listen to them.
Well, thank you so much, Simon. It's been really great talking to you. And what happens to me when I listen to you speak is that, I've got every time you talk, I've got 4 or 5 other questions in my head that I wanted to ask you. I'm super aware that I really, I have. And, my focus is one day if I can get enough courage to come up at 6,000 or 7,000 meters, Kilimanjaro's my highest, which really, really, really took me out of my comfort zone. But I hope to be adventuring with you one day. Thank you so much for your time and your energy. It's great to talk to you.
I will hold you to it.
Yes. It's funny how when you said that, you had a really serious face, and then you kind of laughed afterwards. So I take that as a serious wager. Thank you so much. Cheers, mate. Great to talk to you.
Thank you.